Imagine being dragged from your home in the dead of night, your family ripped apart, your village burned to the ground. This was the brutal reality of colonial Kenya. The Mau Mau fighters, once labeled as savages, were actually freedom fighters, waging a war against one of the most powerful empires on Earth. But Britain didn't just fight back. They unleashed a campaign of terror so brutal that it remained buried for decades. So what really happened? Stay with me, because this story is darker than you've ever been told. Kenya, early 1900s. The British had taken control, and life for native Kenyans, especially the Kikuyu people, became a nightmare. The best land was stolen and handed to white settlers. The Kikuyu were pushed into reserves, forced to work as laborers on land that was once theirs. After World War II, thousands of Kenyan soldiers returned home. They had fought for Britain, expecting freedom in return. Instead, they found more oppression. That's when resistance turned into revolution. In the shadows, a secret movement was forming, the Mau Mau. These weren't just rebels. They were warriors bound by oaths to fight for Kenya's independence, or die trying. But to the British, these oaths weren't about freedom. They were a declaration of war. In 1952, the Mau Mau launched their rebellion. Their strategy? Guerrilla warfare. Night raids, ambushes, and assassinations of colonial officials. Their weapons? Stolen rifles, machetes, and pure determination. The British reacted with fear and brutality. They declared a state of emergency and unleashed hell. Thousands of suspected Mau Mau fighters were rounded up and thrown into concentration camps. These weren't just prisons, they were torture factories. People were beaten, starved, and executed. Rape, mutilation, and electrocution were common. Meanwhile, in the forests, the Mau Mau were being hunted. The British used bombers, commandos, and even Kenyan loyalists to crush the rebellion.
This proud and faithful land suffered from the Mau Mau's crusade of evil. Justice must and will be done.
The British may have defeated the Mau Mau, but they couldn't stop the idea of independence. The brutality of the crackdown shocked the world. The British had been exposed. Their empire wasn't built on civilization, but on blood and terror. By 1963, just a few years later, Kenya finally won its independence. But Britain had a plan to erase its crimes. Thousands of documents detailing the torture, executions, and massacres were destroyed. Survivors were silenced. For decades, the Mau Mau were forgotten. Their fight was labeled as barbaric, their suffering ignored, until 2013, when the UK finally admitted to the atrocities and paid compensation to some of the survivors. But can money erase history? The Mau Mau weren't terrorists, they were freedom fighters. They faced one of the most brutal colonial regimes and paid the price for daring to resist. But their story was hidden, their pain ignored. Now that you know the truth, what do you think? Were they heroes or something else?